today I'm here with Dave Sims. And Dave, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. He was an incredible swimmer, and I'm guessing still is. He ended up going to Stanford, making the Olympics. He's going to tell us all about his experiences. Welcome, Dave. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Okay, our pleasure. First, I'm going to just ask you a few questions about how you got started in swimming and things like that, and then we can go through your whole experience if we can. So how did you get started in swimming?
How did I get started was my grandmother had a house in Michiana Shores, which is on the other side of the Lake Michigan from Chicago. And it was, lakefront property, and learning to swim at a beach is probably, the best way to learn and to develop a love of the water, because, you can go in as deep as you'd like, your toes, your ankles, your knees, your waist, your chest, overhead, whatever, you progress at your own pace. And I had the opportunity to learn to swim in the lake when I was a toddler. And, spent a lot of my summers, age 0 through 12, up at the lake and in the lake. So that was very helpful in developing a love for being in the water. So and I learned to swim. And I remember, friends and relatives, mostly relatives and friends of my relatives, teaching me how to swim at a very early age. And then when I was 8 years old, we joined a summer swim and tennis club. And, immediately we found out that that's what all the kids do in the summer. They join the swim team or the tennis team, and they spend all of their summers playing at the pool. And so that's what we did. And I, at 8 years old, learned to swim the butterfly and the breaststroke and the backstroke properly. And so that was it. That was the start of my swimming career at age 8 at a place called Oakwood Swim and Tennis Club. After that first summer, I enjoyed it so much that my parents agreed to put me on the local YMCA team. So I moved from outdoor to indoor and just kept right on going. And then what was, I think, very interesting about that was when I was 8, swimming for the YMCA, they had a birthday cutoff for your age group. And the birthday cutoff was December 1st. So if your birthday was before December 1st, then you'd age, and you aged up during the season, then you aged up. You're in the next age group. But if your birthday was after December 1st, you could continue to finish the season in that age group, right?
Right.
And my birthday was December 4th. So when we got to the state championships in February or March or whatever that was, it was the YMCA state championships.
Right.
Here I was, 8 years and 3 or 4 months competing against kids who may not have turned 9 yet.
Got it.
So, I had a lot of success in that first season of YMCA swimming. And, that when you're that age and you get a taste of success, it really sticks with you. And, it sort of identifies you, and you think, oh God, I must be a swimmer. And by the time I was 13 years old, I hadn't been having the same kind of success that I had when I was 8 years old. And, I was, by the time I got to be 13, 14, I was barely making the finals. And I was heavier, and that wasn't the only reason, but, I was a late bloomer in terms of, having the growth spurt. So that was difficult too, when you're 14 and you still look like a little kid and you're swimming against some guys who look like they're ready to shave.
I know that one. I was a late developer too. Yep.
Yeah. So, that's really hard on the psyche. And you really got to want it bad at that point to stick with it. And I think the only reason I did was because I had that taste of success when I was young. And I liked it. I wanted to get that back. And then the other thing that really happened to me developmentally was in 1972, I was 9, and my parents took us to the Olympic trials, which were in Portage Park, which was in Chicago. And so at the 72 Olympic trials, we saw Spitz break,
Right.
4 world records. We saw a bunch of these guys from Hinsdale, John Kinsella, John Murphy, a couple others, do really well at the trials.
A lot of Indiana swimmers that had really at that point was very, very dominant. Exactly.
Yeah, for sure, and so that was inspiring. And so there was a group of parents from Hinsdale that had organized a trip to go to Munich, and for whatever reason, some parents dropped out, probably because their son couldn't make it or daughter couldn't make it or whatever. And so there was an opening, and my dad heard about it somehow, and he said, well, let's go to the Olympics in Munich. So we went to see the Olympics in Munich, which was
I saw that on TV. Fantastic. What a great experience that must have been.
Oh, it was incredible. Yeah, I mean, our seats were standing room only. Back then they allowed that sort of thing. And so, we had to line up outside of the swim stadium for like 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours beforehand, just to be at the front of the line. So when they opened the gates, we could run in and get like a front row position in the standing room only section, because we were kids. If we were behind people, we couldn't see.
You couldn't see, right?
So we learned that lesson the first day. And anyway, that was inspiring. And it was so inspiring that we decided to go again to Montreal in 1976.
Okay.
And of course, that was an incredible experience to see because of the results of the USA men's swimming team.
Right.
And, in hindsight, to see how the American women did, I mean, that was inspiring too. They were breaking American records every time they got in the pool too, but that wasn't the headline. And we, those were the days where there was a lot less security. I mean, we were sitting in the stands, and the swimmers, the USA national team, was like in the next section over. So, after they finished, they would come up and talk with their parents and sign autographs. And
what an amazing experience for a kid. Wow. Right.
I was 13, right? And then, I thought, well, actually, when I was 9, I said, I'd like to do that. That's cool, And then in 76 again, I was thinking, I'd still like to make the Olympic team. I didn't have a goal of making it in 1980 because that was only 4 years away, and I was 13 years old. It seemed kind of far-fetched.
Right. There's a lot of development to go between here and there.
Yeah, especially because I was a late bloomer, and I couldn't even make the finals at the Illinois State Championships, and so
when swimmers go through where they're just coming up, I noticed that with me. I didn't even think I was that great of a swimmer at all until I finally won everything in my area and won all the New England championships. I just had no idea that I was, but it's more social and fun and things like that. But I didn't realize that. What do you credit with kind of making the change, going from what you saw as kind of maybe an average swimmer to like the next level?
When I was 15, we had a coaching change. And the parents that were running the team, it was a board-controlled team.
Right.
They did a nationwide search for a new coach. So we wound up finding a gentleman out of Sarasota, Florida. His name was Tim Hill. And he had a lot of success putting people onto national teams. His teams at the Sarasota YMCA broke all kinds of records, So he was looking for a change and a new opportunity. So he came to Joliet, and, he he sat me down in the first week that we were there and said, well, what are your goals? I said, I want to be on the Olympic team. And I probably almost fell out of his chair laughing inside, but
But
you
you
know,
were serious.
took it seriously. And he said, well, I think if you want to do that, we're going to have to think about swimming some other events. That was his nice way of saying, you're not going to be a sprinter.
Right.
So, so yeah, we, and I said, okay, fine. I switched my focus from being a sprinter in my mind to being a distance swimmer, and made a lot of sense. When you look at the numbers, there's fewer participants in those longer events.
That's
So,
right.
if there's less competition, your odds of reaching a higher level are enhanced, right? So, and he also, took a look at my skills and talents and said, you've got the mindset to do this. So we
And
started
it
down
does
that
take a
path
special
of,
person to do that type of training as well as the racing itself. It's just a very different mindset than a sprinter.
yeah, and I started doing pretty well in the mile and the 500 the following summer, and went to junior nationals and did well there. I think I placed at my first junior nationals in the mile. And that kind of made me a believer. And then, worked harder and harder, and, was moving upward by big leaps and bounds, as so many teenagers do. And my junior year of high school, I got bursitis, like a bad case of bursitis in my shoulder. And it persisted for, the better part of a year. I'd rest it and then get back to training, it would hurt again. I'd rest it, get back to training, it hurt again. It went through this
Right.
cycle
They repeat a lot. I've had a lot of injuries and they come back a lot of times, right?
Yeah. So at one point, I went to see the team doctor down at IU.
Oh,
His name was Dominguez, and he basically said, you just got to stay out of the water for a lot longer than you really want to here.
right.
And then when you come back, you're not gonna work. You're not gonna use that arm heavily. You're gonna take some of the workload off of that and come back slowly. So I spent almost my entire junior year like kicking, or at one point I was completely out of the water and I just did running and cycling. The silver lining of all of that was once I was able to get back in the water, my leg strength was phenomenal.
That makes a huge difference, doesn't it?
Whereas I was like a 2-beat crossover kick kind of distance swimmer before the injury. After the injury, I had more of a 4-beat, like a constant 4-beat, occasional 6-beat kick during the race. I could keep that up for a mile.
And that puts a lot of pressure on the competition. I'm thinking, right? Because when you use your legs and your quadriceps, right, they're so heavily muscled that a lot of people don't realize the benefit of training those legs that much. Huge benefit.
Yeah, well, and it's funny. I was never a big believer in kicking, even all the way through my career. Because I was not a fast kicker. Right. I could kick for a long time, but I wasn't fast at it, and so I thought, well, this isn't my strength. Like I shouldn't be spending a lot of time doing this. And to me, kicking just in terms of physics just didn't make sense to me, because you've got these large muscles, which is you use to expend a lot of energy, and a lot of metabolic consumption, happens in the leg muscles, but they're moving like this, right, in the water. And that doesn't really generate forward propulsion. And right. I thought, like, why am I doing this?
Takes a lot of ankle flexibility and to get the right angle for and it's still not as efficient as a pull, of course, right? It's not going to give you the type of propulsion. And it's interesting though, the amount of contribution it makes to the internal workings of your body, and right, and building the shape that you're in is phenomenal. And then also, I think when you kick your legs, it tends to inject energy all through your body, because a lot of the blood is right. So there's a lot of materials being delivered at the cellular level all through the body.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense.
Does that make sense? So it's like the global energy is moving now. Right?
Yeah, that makes
And
a lot of
that's why
sense.
I see coaches a lot of times going like this, right? And then sometimes they don't even realize that what they're doing is they're turning on that energy. And if your legs kind of die out, the energy stops moving as fast, right? And then all of a sudden everything kind of tones down.
So interesting point, okay? And I haven't ever thought of this before, John. In a race, even my longest race, what I knew was that I had to build the effort level the whole way. So meaning if I start out a mile swimming, let's say I do a mile, and in a mile you swim, I don't know, like 88% of your maximum speed. Okay, so my strategy would be to start at 85% effort and finish at 92% effort.
Right.
And just gradually build the whole
Right.
way.
Yep.
And that is, you have to know your body really well. But what you just said makes total sense, because I knew I had to conserve my legs, and I would gradually add, a little bit of leg effort the whole race. And then finally, by the last, I don't know, 150, 100
Right.
yards, 75, whatever, I'd be 6 feet kicking. And on the last length of a race, not only would I be 6 feet kicking, but I would be, it was like a furious 6 feet kick.
Right. And had you, so that's a mental strategy that you built, right? The emotional energy that you're using is and it's very important. If you get a great strategy, and the one that you had was, kind of a simple progression, but you can do all kinds of things with mental strategies like that. And I would have loved to work with you on that, although at that point I wasn't doing this.
And there was also this other phenomenon which I experienced, which was, as long as I kept pressing down on the accelerator, I could keep going. Mm-hmm. If I ever let up, it was over.
Right.
Like, I don't know, physiologically, I don't know why that was, but I mean, maybe it was just a mental thing, but
it could have been both. I mean, because once you start letting down, right, that energy isn't coming at the same rate. And I think that, personally think that the emotional energy is heavily driving and overriding the physical energy. Because when you're exhausted, but you realize that you can set the world record, or that you're racing someone even better, right? Right, when they're right there, it doesn't matter how tired you are anymore.
Right.
It's different.
But
and
your comment about the legs flushing through and pushing, allowing you to go to expend more energy, that makes total sense now.
Okay, and then now, as you look back, what do you like so much about swimming? What did you like all the way through, and why do you think it was such a great experience for you?
Well, I've always told people that if you want to be a competitive swimmer, first and foremost, you got to love being in the water, right? There's just no other way to say it. Like, you got to love, like, being underwater and, like, liking the way that feels, and liking the sensations of the water. Because if you don't, it's just a lot of work.
Right, it's too much effort at that point.
Yeah, right. And I think a lot of kids, they get into swimming at a young age because they do love the water. And then, they somehow maybe lose some of that feeling. But, I never lost it. I still like being in the water, and water sports and water recreation and water activities are, sort of top of my list of fun things to do.
Let's talk about, I mean, the next step that you took, because you made just an amazing achievement that most people, I think every swimmer dreams of making. You made the Olympics, and that was in 1980. Is that right?
Yes.
And you were 17 years old, and just, can you tell me a little bit about that? Because that was a unique experience. First, you were young, you were able to do that, and then it was such a tough experience for so many that were there, and you were part of that experience as well. Can you tell us a little bit about how that impacted you and what happened there?
So making the Olympic team in 1980 was a interesting experience in hindsight. And of course, my perspective on it then has changed a lot over my life, and I have a very different perspective of it now. In 1980, I was 17 years old, and I had achieved my first world ranking in January of 1980. University of Texas, they had a big long course meet the first weekend of January.
What event was that in?
That was in the 800-meter freestyle.
Gotcha.
And it was during the collegiate season, so most of the college guys weren't there unless they had taken the year off to train for the Olympics. So there was a couple guys there who had been on the U.S. national team, and I finished ahead of them. So that was very surprising for me. But it was also about a week after the Soviets invaded Afghanistan. Anyway, it was probably the next week, Jimmy Carter came out and said, well, we condemn what the Soviets are doing, and if they don't get out of Afghanistan in the next 30 days, then we are going to boycott the Olympics. And so that was the beginning of what I would say was a slow motion train wreck.
Yeah.
Because no matter where I was along the way, there were many, many points in time where you could choose to either believe that it could still happen or give up hope. So what I mean is, so Carter said, get out in 30 days, and we won't go. If you do get out, then we will go. So for the next 30 days, I thought, well, the Soviets would be crazy to not get out of Afghanistan. I mean, they got the Olympics coming up, and if the U.S. and everybody else boycotts, why would they want that? I mean, they were throwing the biggest party in the world, and it was, they were kind of threatening their own success, right? Now, this doesn't make any sense. They can pull out of Afghanistan if they wanted to, and then invade the next day after the Olympics if they want to.
Right.
So that, kind of took us through mid-February, right? Or early February. And let's see, so that was a big, heavy training period, very heavy training, because at that point, I after the swim in Texas, I realized that I got a real shot here. Whereas before that, I really had no reason to believe I had a shot. And so what happened then? There was a lot of political posturing. Carter had a delegation that was trying to convince the IOC that they should postpone the Olympics or take it away from Russia and award it to some other city somewhere, or perhaps even break it up into a bunch of different locations. And the IOC said, no, that's crazy. I mean, you're just one country, and the Olympics is more than just about the United States.
Right.
And all of those other attempts to find an alternative solution, they failed. They went nowhere. And it was, you know, I'm sure during that process, Carter was starting to realize he may have made a mistake. And so the 30 days came and went. Carter said, we're not going to the Olympics.
So you guys were basically being used as leverage.
Yeah, right. We were being used as leverage. But he did leave the door open. He said, unless they do pull out, and unless the USOC decides, they're not going to go. So it was so funny. You know, I just always felt like we were going to go. This is crazy. This is not going to happen.
Right.
And so, you know, I mean, I was naive, but that was how I was able to maintain.
You have to believe that way, though. I mean, yeah. Wow.
Yeah, you did. And so it was in mid-February that the Winter Olympics happened. And in the Winter Olympics, that was when the Miracle on Ice happened. And, you know, the U.S., everybody knows that story, and the U.S. beat the Soviets, and that shifted the American sentiment, because prior to the Olympics, the American sentiment was that we shouldn't go, you know, we should boycott, and that was the right thing to do. But then when, you know, the hockey team beat the Soviets, everything changed. And, you know, people were chanting, "Go USA, USA." And in fact, at our high school state championship, this is a great story. Our high school state championship, we're on the deck. It was you know, we do ours on a Friday, Saturday, prelims on Friday, finals on Saturday. And I forget whether it was prelims or finals, but one of the hockey games was going on. And I think it was the Soviet game. I don't remember, but I think it was. And so you know, there was no internet back then, and so somehow, you know, somebody in the stands had a radio, or, you know, like one of those mini TVs, and was watching the game, and so they would announce the score every time a goal was scored. And every time a goal was scored by the U.S. team, you know, the crowd started going crazy, you know, and chanting. And I remember that happening one time before one of my races, and it just got me so pumped up. You know, I just, it must have been the finals, because I swam really great. I swam great in the finals. I didn't have a good prelims, but I had a great finals.
Right.
Anyway, that was inspirational for me to see, you know, just see the American sentiment changing, like, in real time. Right. So the next thing that happened was in March, President Carter, you know, called a bunch of Olympians and people from the USOC to the White House to have a chat and discuss whether or not boycotting was the right thing. And there was no discussion. Some fellow Olympians that I know that were there said that it was just an open and closed, just a statement, you know, like, sorry, we're not going. And if you feel strongly otherwise, well, then you're not very American. You know, you don't support American values. And
that's an interesting.
So that was in March, but in that meeting, Carter still said the USOC is going to vote in April on whether or not the US should go. And if they vote to go, or if I don't know, he said something like, hopefully they'll vote not to go. So there was still a door open, because the USOC officials were, you know, kind of saying, like, we don't support this boycott. You know, we think we should be going. And meanwhile, the USOC was being threatened to have all of their corporate sponsorships and federal subsidies being pulled away, which would have been the end of the USOC. So they really had a gun to their head.
Right.
And they went to this meeting in April in Colorado Springs, and the vice president was there, and he spoke to everybody, and he said, like basically told them, if you vote to go, then you're un-American. And so they voted not to go. And they voted not to go unless the Soviets pulled out of Afghanistan before the entry deadline. And there was an entry deadline in May. So there was still hope, right? There's still hope that we could go.
Right, and you have to think you're going no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of the older guys that I knew were just, hanging up their suits and saying, that's it, we're done, we're not going. This is silly to keep training. And there were other ones who kept training, but, didn't have the belief that there was still, a chance. Mm-hmm. And so it was around the time of the Spring Nationals, which was in April, that I don't remember. A lot of people who were a lot of swimmers who had stuck around to train for an extra year or two, they decided that was the end of the road. However, there was this entry deadline still looming in May, and there was a rower, a lady named Anita DeFranz, who she was also a law student, and she filed a lawsuit against the U.S. government saying that, they didn't have the right to bar us from going. Mm. So that lawsuit got fast-tracked, and, her goal was to win the lawsuit prior to the entry deadline. And finally, that failed because of political pressures.
Right.
And once the entry deadline passed, it was over. It was a done deal. And so what USA Swimming did was they decided to postpone the Olympic trials and make the Olympic trials, combine them with the nationals at the end of the summer. Because I think the trials were planned for June and the nationals were in July or August, I don't remember. And so they decided, well, we'll just combine the two. We'll still pick a team, even though we know we're not going. And the dates of those trials was a couple days behind the events in Moscow. Mm-hmm. So the Olympics actually started before. Yeah, so the Olympics were going on when our trials started. And they had, what was really cool about that nationals and those trials was they had two scoreboards side by side. And on one side was our results, mm-hmm. and on the other side was the top 3 times from the Olympics.
Gotcha.
So when we finished in the finals, you could see exactly where our times would have fallen against what happened in Moscow.
Wow.
So that was really fascinating and pretty cool to think about.
What a unique situation, almost like today with the pandemic that we have and things like this, and people finding ways to make things exciting and things like that. But wow, you guys went through so much. It's such a tough thing. Just I can't imagine everyone that I speak to about that. The first thing they do is to sigh before they talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really, it was much harder, I think, on the older people, the older swimmers at the time, right. Because there was no professional swimming back then, and there were rules in place that you had to be an amateur. You couldn't accept money. Right. You couldn't even accept like a free airline ticket to attend a meet. There was nothing like that. And so
take that away, the one thing that you were training for away, right after.
Yeah, so
you can only do this.
People. I mean, back then swimmers just hung up their swimsuits after college. There was nothing more to hang around for,
right. There wasn't master swimming. There was nothing, right?
Yeah, so I was 17 at the time, and I was just getting ready to go off to college, and I thought, oh well, yeah, this sucks. I won't get to go to Moscow. Um, was thinking, but I'm got 4 years at Stanford coming up, and 4 years from now, I'll probably be the world record holder, and it's going to be in LA, and that's just going to be an awesome party, you know.
Right.
Um, just full of optimism,
Right.
and so, the real tragedy, for me was 4 years later at the '84 Olympic trials, where I was actually faster than I was in '80, but instead of finishing second, I finished fifth. Uh, and so at that point, like the Olympic dream was gone, you know. Just I realized that was the end of the road, and that hurt a lot more than it did in '80.
I'm sure. I'm sure. I Yeah. I tell you what, I just want to give you a hug after that one. That's so tough. Wow. And I know that everyone that I've ever talked to that qualified for that and went to, I have, really good friends that I knew in Indiana, Jim Halliburton, wonderful people, John Moffitt from Stanford. There's so many great swimmers, and then John had that problem in the next in '84 Olympics too, and just such tough stories. And I feel like in a lot of ways you guys went through a war, and it just lasts a lifetime. I'm sure it doesn't go away, but just thank you for
You know,
trying to represent our country there. Doing
yeah,
everything.
everybody's experience, I think, with 1980 was a little bit different. And I know some people, some swimmers that went into some very low periods of their life after that, and
Yeah.
others, if they went on and made the team in '84, then kind of it was all a race, so to speak, and yeah, but and then there was other members of the team who, just kind of said, "Oh well, bad luck," kind of went on with their lives, and uh, didn't necessarily define who they became. I mean, when you really look at it, like I had a long, successful swimming career. I, I had a lot of success. I traveled all over the world before I was 21 or 22. I got a full scholarship to a Division I school. Um, I had a lot of fun.
And
It's
for
just
all of us, just so you know, Dave, for all of us, you're an Olympian, and that's it, and that's the way we look at it. That has nothing to do with you guys' fault or anything. You did everything that anybody that ever went to the Olympics did to do that, and
yeah.
we appreciate you representing our country.
Thank you. It was
Unfortunately, we didn't give you the opportunity.
it was really, I think, nice what the USOC did for us. I mean, they didn't have to pick an Olympic team. They didn't have to treat us like Olympians. They didn't have to do a lot of things, and they have done a lot of that over the years. And Congress gave us the gold medal of achievement. They didn't have to do that.
Right.
They did. And I have a whole other story about that, which is part of the 1980 story, but I'm going to have to.
If you don't mind, we'd love to bring you back anytime. This is, yeah, it's you got me emotional at this point. Holy cow! Wow, thank you so much for your time.
You know
here.
what? You want me to call you back? I might be able to finish this in about 40 minutes from now.
I'm running from meeting to meeting today. Could we do it maybe in a few days or something, and we'll find a time?
Yeah, sure.
Would that work?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've got so many questions I want to ask you. We'll have to cut it in a couple parts, but thank you so much.
Okay.